All right, we are live from all points, north and south, from basements and from the sunny coast of California. How's everyone doing
Not
today?
too sunny today, actually. It's we finally got some rain, so we're happy about that.
So it's not true that it never rains in Southern California?
I'm
It,
in
it
Northern California.
it rains. It's just,
Yeah,
very sporadically. It's been a lot windier lately.
yeah, I
Yeah,
get rain every day, so that's just part of life.
Okay.
So
we've got a
how's
new
everyone doing
guest
today?
today.
Yep,
Very cool.
yes, that's great. Darianne, thank you. Darianne runs training for Cribble. Super excited. We're going to talk about sandboxes. And
Yeah.
if you're not familiar, like what is a sandbox, we'll talk about that. And then Nick and I are going to talk about very, very important privacy, data governance, proposed SEC rules. We may bore the pants off of certain people, but for other people, it's important stuff. If you work in these areas, if you work with this kind of data, it's pretty crucial. Nick, what do you
Yeah,
think?
it's changing every day. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, it really is. And just the implications, especially for publicly traded companies, I think for the SEC rulings are going to be something. Also, I think from the Privacy Shield, let's talk about the Facebook lawsuit. I think there's some real implications for global companies that are just going to be something else.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, so I'm going to bring up a deck. We're going to start our show. So, so we start talking about Cribl Sandboxes. I think this is something that I found remarkable. I've never seen anything like it. Cribl gives you the ability to go to the website, pull up our tools, use our tools, have essentially a guided walkthrough with data to show you immediately what you can do with our tools if it matters. If it matters, you don't have to install anything. You're out a little bit of time, but that immediate value, that ability to go hands on is something I've never seen before. I think it's just
Yeah.
an immeasurable valuable. And so we brought Darianne on to talk about Cribl Sandboxes, how people are using them, and the value they're getting. So what do you
Yeah,
think,
no,
Darianne?
yeah, no, I love being here, guys. Thanks for asking me on. Learning at Cribl, it's something that we really want. Our goal is to make it as easy as possible, really, for anyone to learn about our products. Whether you're, a potential future customer or a new user at an existing customer, a partner. We really believe that knowledge of our products should always be free, and it should always be really, as easy as easy to consume as possible. We want, everyone who's interested to be able to, kind of pick up the basics of our products. So one of those is the sandboxes. We originally introduced the Cribl Sandbox with our Stream Fundamentals course, and really what it is, think of the Cribl Sandbox courses as some more hands-on tutorials. They, unlike our other training platforms that really, tell you and show you how things work, the sandboxes, really let you take a test drive with real data. Actually, they allow you to build a level of confidence that they allow you to build a level of confidence with the product, really before working in your own demo environments, and your own production environments. They're great. They walk you through the real steps of setting up a Cribl instance, actually seeing how to set up the sources and the destinations, and most importantly, really how to shape that data. So you see that data flowing in. You can apply some form of shaping. You can apply functions. You can see what that data is really doing. In essence, it kind of lets you push all the buttons, which is the fun part, right? Um, before you really commit to it, and it always gives you the ability to kind of start over and start again and test it out another way. So yeah, it's a really great tool. We have a lot of great feedback on it. It's fantastic.
So how many
Everybody who
how
sees
many sign? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nick.
yeah, just jumping real quick. Like everybody who sees the sandboxes is just amazed by them. Like I routinely hear, "I've never seen anything like this." It makes it really easy to get started. And before I joined the company, we still had sandboxes, and that was when we were 50 people. And it gave me an opportunity to figure out, like, all right, I've heard about the product, but let me actually play with it and see what it does. And it's this really gentle on ramp into all of this stuff you can do with Cribl Stream. Sorry, over to you.
I
No,
was just
no.
good.
Great.
I was going to ask, typically in a given week, how many people do you have that use the Sandbox?
So it seems on average, I actually checked these stats recently. So on average, we get about 100 registrations a week. Now, it started with the Cribl Stream Fundamentals course, but we really, there's a course on AppScope fundamentals. There's, managing stream with GitOps, amongst a lot of others. And then we actually also have these shorter tutorials that are around more of a kind of 10-minute mark, shaping, it kind of, those go around like data shaping in stream, working with metrics, even have an introduction to Cribl Edge in there. So we get about 100 a week. We've issued, the Stream Fundamentals is actually issued to a certificate. So if you choose to once you complete the Stream Fundamentals, you can actually opt in to receive a certificate. I believe we've issued somewhere upwards of about 2,500 of those so far. And again, that's not a great measurement because you had to opt into getting that, or if you didn't want to, it was no big deal. But like I said, we get really great feedback because, for instance, in the Stream Fundamentals, it's an interactive tutorial environment, really. You really get to use Stream's built-in data generator that sources, so the built-in data generator source feeds the data in, and then we can really show you the results of how we're shaping that data, how we're shaping the outputs. Fundamentals will walk you through, routing and data reduction through, like I said, important concepts like sources, destinations, routes, pipelines, functions. So when you've ultimately completed it, the idea is to have a good beginning understanding of really how to shape and how to mold Cribl to your specific use case. So again, if it doesn't work, you can kind of start back over, get in another environment, or like I said, find another sandbox that really, suits your interest.
That's pretty
It's
awesome.
interesting, because you think about we've gotten so much value from these sandboxes, right? The community loves them, our prospects love them, our customers, if they want to demonstrate functionality and don't want to touch their installed instances. Why don't other companies do this? And it's because this is hard. This is basically a product that we don't sell, and it's full-time development work for multiple people. There's a lot of work that goes into the care and feeding of these sandboxes and building them. And every time we update the product, we've also got to update the sandboxes. So this is but we're serious about it, right? Darian, you can certainly go into a lot of detail on this. We're serious about keeping this going and giving our community every opportunity to play with this product and get, there's a big push for education at Cribl. Darian, you can certainly talk about that, but this is tough to do, right? This is why not everybody does it, because this is a ton of work, huge amount of investment. There's a big people cost, but it does pay off.
Yeah. I think just learning at Cribl in general, right? We really do, like I said, we've said it a couple of times, we really do receive great feedback on that for those instances right there. It's really not something that is offered really anywhere else. But that being said, we're always looking for ways to make, learning about our products easier. We're always looking for ways of making training and learning just as efficient of a process as possible. Because, you're not paying to invest in it, but you are investing your time, and that's definitely worth something. We always want to know what more we can do, though, right? So we love hearing feedback from the community. We love hearing, what else would add value to them, whether it's in, whatever, hey, this would be a great sandbox, or this would be a great environment to bring up. You can always reach out to training@cribl.com. That's one way to provide that feedback. Always in our Slack community. That's another great way to provide that feedback. And we really do have some exciting stuff coming down the pipeline as the training department here, in ultimately kind of helping make that learning environment as easy and as fun as possible. So it's getting exciting.
Darian, so we have a question from the community. Mark is asking if there's plans for more additional sandboxes.
Yeah, like I said, I feel like, yes, the short answer to that is yes. What they are specifically, I can't say just now. But as we, again, when you kind of look at our products, right? We'll have sandboxes shaped around our products, but then the pieces that that really help us and make our products like what they are, we have stuff on that. So, you know, we have a GitOps one, for instance, right? Because that's a really core piece of technology that, you know, is really helpful for our users to use. So anything that we think is helpful or useful or worth, again, someone's time, we want to include.
That's awesome.
Mark, if you've
Quick
got
question.
ideas that you'd like to see, join the community, honestly, or
Yeah.
drop a comment here. Anything you'd like us to think about when it comes to sandboxes, lots of, you know, we're happy to take the input.
So
Yeah.
what's the cost of Sandboxes? So, you know, how do we invoice? How do we invoice for access to training at Cribl?
Free. I'm gonna just lead with free, right? So it's been a goal of ours to always keep training at Cribl free. You can actually access the sandboxes directly at sandbox.cribl.io. And I think there's a couple maybe email verifications that you have to do. That's pretty much it. And you can pop into either the kind of main courses at the top, and then you'll see those shorter tutorials down below, to really, you know, dig in and see what helps you out in your specific environment. You know, we like I said, we want to make it as free and as easy as possible always. And that's with everything kind of coming down the pipeline too. You know, we have some updates coming to our training platform itself. There's also some other cool new stuff we're embarking on in the world of certifications. You might have heard a little bit of buzz around that. It's not quite ready for me to dig into yet. Maybe in the next coming weeks, I'll pop back in here. You know, but again, no matter whether it's certifications, whether it's our sandboxes, our demo environments, you know, we want to make sure that they're always accessible, easily accessible, and free.
That's great news. I really appreciate it. I mean, this is I've done this like with at other companies. They would make some flash or shockwave or some sort of simulated nonsense, and you never got a sense of the product. Being able to actually see the product, being able to actually use it, just it helps you make decisions, and it to me it's a huge value add.
Yeah, and do it over and over again, right? Like be able to restart your instance from scratch and dig into another, you know, to change it up a little bit, right? You don't get just one try or one use, or, you know, oh, you're going to run out of
A
licenses.
14-day trial. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you
Oh,
can always access it as many times as you need to. And again, that's just part of the beauty of it.
Yeah,
that's great. So go ahead, Nick. Sorry.
well, just one last thing, you know, for me, you know, working on the marketing side, I don't often get to play with the product as much as I want. And when we do a big release, the sandboxes are great for me because I actually get to go play with all the new functionality and in a very safe way where I'm not breaking other configurations. So even just, you know, trying to ramp up internally there, it's been really invaluable, at least for me.
Yeah, it really is. It's a great tool. It was actually one of the ways that I learned the product is as you know, much as I could too, coming in and coming from the world of networking actually. Same thing, whether it works no matter where you're coming from, what you're doing. It gives you that nice kind of beginner approach, but again, you can shape it to your level of expertise and experience for sure.
Awesome. This
Yeah.
has been a great intro to our sandbox environment. And if you're either watching live or you're watching this time shifted, if you've got feedback, drop into the community. Ed, do you want to put the community link up?
Sure.
And
And
we're always happy to take that feedback.
Yeah,
and
you can
also
also email. I was going to say too, you can also send an email if it's specific to you know, requests for different sandboxes or ideas, or, you know, even if you run into any problems or issues, you can always email training@cribl.io also, and that will go directly to the training team.
So we're going to have you back in a couple of weeks when you're ready for the big announcement. A lot
Yeah.
of excitement. I know Chris is excited. So I think the entire community will be thrilled. So we're going to have you back on the show in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good, guys. Well, and again, any questions, let me know. But I'm going to pop off, and everyone enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you for your
Thanks for
time.
your time.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, Chris, thanks.
Right,
Appreciate that.
that was awesome. I mean, it's
yeah.
so glad.
So Christopher Owen on LinkedIn, thanks for that comment. Yeah, it's like really, we get a ton of great feedback, and it's good. I always relay it to the folks that are building these sandboxes out. So they love hearing it. All right, now for the second part of today's
Right.
live stream.
Time for
So if
coffee.
anybody's
One
suffering
second.
from, if you're suffering from insomnia,
Mhm.
this is like the part for you. But I think we're seeing a lot of shifts in data privacy laws globally. Privacy Shield 2.0 was just kind of pseudo announced, but that means we had a Privacy Shield 1.0, and before that we had Safe Harbor. And Ed, I know you know a lot about these, so I'll let you give a lot of color here. I'm just going to kind of
Yeah.
go through what some of the highlights are. So Privacy Shield 1.0 was basically invalidated by the Court of Justice of the European Union. And this guy, Max Schrems, who is an Austrian data privacy activist, effectively, complained a long time ago that Facebook did not adequately protect his data when they exported it from the EU and brought it into the US, and did not offer equivalent EU quality protections of his data. And so Safe Harbor was invalidated. And then the second attempt was this thing called Privacy Shield. And that basically said, all right, if a US entity, like a company or US, now we have Mark's full attention. Good. I'm glad this is working. we're not really sure how this is going to go on a live stream.
There you go.
So Privacy Shield was the second draft of this idea, and it tried to address some of the reasons that Safe Harbor got eliminated. But Max Schrems once again came out and said, hey, based on what's happening with the Snowden information and data leaks, it's clear that Facebook is not protecting my data at the same level as the EU requires them to do by law. And so for Privacy Shield 1.0, companies only had to self-certify. There was no third-party organization saying, yes, you're fulfilling all of these requirements. And so parts of Privacy Shield were invalidated. Some things were like, the mechanism is good, right? Like the standard contract clauses, SCCs, those were determined to be adequate, but how they get implemented was anyone's guess. And so the court didn't go far enough in invalidating all of Privacy Shield. Some of it was like, that's kind of okay, and if you kind of squint right. But it didn't, companies are still kind of left in limbo. And so, what were the real problems with Privacy Shield 1.0? Why did it get invalidated? There weren't adequate safeguards for data protections, and EU citizens, or anyone falling under, there's a bunch of acronyms I'm trying to remember, but anyone falling under the EU data privacy regime needs to have some way of saying, I want my data invalidated, or I want my data erased, or otherwise not used for analysis. And that's both for the US government and for US companies. And so because those two gaps were there, now we're looking at Privacy Shield 2.0. So before we go to that, Ed, do you want to offer any color on Privacy Shield 1.0? Ed, in your former life, you spent a lot of time worried about this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I got to say, this guy Max Schrems is a legend. Can you imagine? Can you imagine shaking the entire data privacy for frankly the entire world? Because the trends that I see is that more and more countries are copying what the EU is doing with data. So it's not just something isolated to the EU. This is something that's growing everywhere, and this has an enormous impact on multinationals. And it's a huge issue. If you're a multinational, you want to be able to do with what you want with your data. And the thing is, you see as a company, it's my data, not your data. And the EU sees that differently. And so this is something that, and from a cost standpoint, from a complexity standpoint, I mean, I've seen rumblings of, I don't think it's ever going to happen, but like Facebook says, we're just going to pull out of Europe or pull out of the EU. And those are, and just because they feel like it's not going to be worth the effort. Do I see it really happening? Not so much, but it's an issue. And so this is something that if you operate in multiple countries, this is something you got to pay attention to. And one thing I want to mind that I've seen firsthand, a U.S. company that does business in the EU but has no physical presence in the EU can still be subject to these rules. So, for example, if you're an EU citizen, you're sending transactions or communicating with a company that's actually based in the U.S., these rules still apply. And so,
Yeah.
and one thing I think with especially with shrimps too, I mean, there's some ideas that in order to deal with EU data, it has to stay in the EU. So can you imagine you're that company? I'm in the US. I don't have a physical presence. I have no data center in the EU. Being required to open up a fairly substantial data center in the EU in order to comply. So these are big. It's a big deal.
Other issues were like around, using cloud storage, right? Because you may not always
Yep.
know where that data is going, and it can be challenging to ensure that you comply. But net, this idea of self-certification is frankly laughable.
Oh yeah.
What I found interesting was that there's so much of this that's around U.S. signals intelligence and data collection. And from my time in the military, I worked in signals intelligence. There are a number of guidelines. They're called USIDs, United States Signals Intelligence Directives, and
Yep.
those basically guide what the U.S. intelligence community, basically anybody falling under the NSA, and a lot of military intelligence units actually fall under the NSA, not directly under like their given like Navy banner, like what I was under. And so those USIDs guide like what data I can collect under what conditions. And so those are really the guide points for signals intelligence collection in the US, right? And if you're not a US citizen and the Fourth Amendment doesn't apply to you, a lot of things don't apply to you when they're looking at collecting your data. And so that has really run afoul of European regulators. So
Yep.
now
Thanks.
we've got, go ahead.
I would say
Go ahead.
thanks for bringing that up. This is something I ran into firsthand as well. Had a lawyer in the EU for an acquisition say, "We expect you to tell the FBI no if they come with a search warrant for this data." I'm like, I'm not telling the FBI no. You tell them no. I mean, they're not going to haul me away. But that's just not how things work. And so that's why
Yeah.
these things have to be worked out at a much higher level because of police or the FBI or somebody comes to a U.S. company and says we want this, you're going to give it to them. That's just what it is. But the
And
EU
the
is
FBI
very
does not
much
fall
against that.
under the FBI does not fall under USIDs, right? But like the NSA does, the National Reconnaissance
Mm.
Office, National Geospatial Intelligence, all those organizations fall under the USID declarations. And so you've got lots of different laws that may conflict with each other. And so you're always going to bias towards the one that keeps you out of jail.
Oh, I was just from one of the shrimps too fallouts is that expectation of protection from U.S. law enforcement as well. And that's one of the things that's saying, hey, if you're going to do this, you have to have that data in the EU and this is one of the things that I had to point out to the lawyer. If the U.S. company owns the data and it's in the EU, it's still in scope for that. It's still in scope for that search warrant. It doesn't really matter where it is. But
Definitely.
as you're saying, this is why these things need to be worked out because otherwise it's confusion, complexity, and expense for the companies that are managing all this data.
So now we've got Privacy Shield 2.0, right? Now this was announced at the end of March when President Biden went to the EU about the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And one of the things that was announced was this, hey, we're going to fix all this stuff. And there's nothing substantive that has been announced. This is kind of like an aspirational agreement. So no one knows what's going to be in Privacy Shield 2.0. What we've seen so far, like some basic talking points from the White House, but there's no policy details yet. So we can't really plan for how we're going to modify our data handling. But what the White House said, and the EU said the same thing, right? We want to strengthen the privacy and civil liberties governing U.S. signals intelligence activities. Okay, I don't really know what that means, right? Because if you're not a U.S. citizen, all bets are off, in my view here. They want to create some kind of redress mechanism. And now, will that apply to private companies or public companies as well? Once again, they get to self-certify here. So it's difficult to validate, are these companies handling data correctly? If I do trigger a redress, how do I ensure that they're actually doing what they said they would do? Or will they take my request seriously? And also add additional oversight to signals intelligence activities. So it's too early to say if Privacy Shield 2.0 is actually going to, one, is it going to do anything meaningful in the first place? And two, how long will it last? right? Max Schrems has already said it doesn't really look like it's going to be any different. And his position is very much that unless the US changes its own laws, there will be no meaningful change in what Privacy Shield 2.0 might offer to both governments and companies trying to egress data out of the European jurisdiction.
I think you're right. I think there's so much unknown. I think for anyone who's handling data, if you're in data governance, if you're in logging, you're handling telemetry, whatnot, I think the thing you got to focus on is the capabilities aspect. Make sure you have the capabilities to handle things that are foreseeable. You have the ability to, especially to depersonalize, to route data, to understand where data is coming from. So when I say that what's important is you need the ability that, so it has to be located in the EU to then to then tag, understand your data, to route data to your EU data center versus your US data center. You need the ability to depersonalize. That's probably my chief recommendation for anything dealing with this type of data. Depersonalize it, make friends with your lawyers, and have them say, hey, what do we do? What do we need to do to depersonalize this? And that's where something like Cribl Stream is incredibly powerful about the depersonalization mechanisms, the routing mechanisms. Also consider using something like MaxMind's GeoIP database to tag every event that says, I believe it's region equals EU, for example. So that way you know what's in scope for the EU and what's not, because you don't want to have to treat all your data as if it's been contaminated and subject to these laws. You want to make sure you've narrowed the scope of what you have to manage. Be very careful about it, because the ramifications, I'm guessing the EU is going to start saying to companies like Facebook, you can't do business here if you don't follow our laws. The US laws be damned. And so you're going to, so there's going to be a confrontation. There's going to be a Schrems 3. I'm almost sure about that.
Yeah. And the point is like, this is going to happen and it's going to exist for a certain amount of time. And companies are going to say, all right, I'm acting under Privacy Shield 2.0, and then it's going to change again. So, to Ed's point, so Mark's commenting in LinkedIn right now, this is why they bought Cribl for this use case, because these things change constantly, and you want to be able to push that data origination point to the earliest possible point where data is being generated. So you're
Exactly.
always ensuring that you're falling within adequate safeguards. So this stuff will change, right? That's a guarantee. Every state in the US is likely going to have its own privacy laws requiring distinct handling. And so you need to build flexibility into your data pipeline. And that's really where, to Mark's comment, to what Ed said earlier in his previous life, that's really where Cribl Stream comes in. So you can start to think about, all right, as these things change, I can change with them and I'm not locked into anything. Even with replay functionality, right? You can also store, safe versions of data. And Mark's waiting for the first version of Schrems Latin America. Yeah, that's going to happen too.
I got news. That's already there. I mean, I've had to run into issues with Brazil has a pretty significant set of data privacy laws. So does Colombia. I mean, so does Chile. And so that's what I was a point. This is not a narrow just an EU thing. This is something to prepare for the entire world. And that's why I think you got to focus on the capabilities to be able to adjust as the Schrems 3s, 4s, and 5s keep coming out.
Yeah. All right. So that's what we got on Privacy Shield 2.0. We're definitely going to be watching this space quite a bit. And we'll likely be writing about it on our blog. So check that out as well. And then we've got another thing that happened, a new SEC proposal. I think this is fascinating. I've been waiting for this to happen. I called this like inevitable. 6 months ago. Yeah. So the SEC has come out with a proposed regulation that would require companies to disclose a material, and I don't know what, I'm sure there's, Ed, with your training, I'm sure there's right, what material means. Ed went to law school, so we always defer to Ed for those things. He's actually my lawyer as well. But so the SEC is proposing a new rule that public companies, if they experience a material cybersecurity breach, and that could be data loss, that could be loss of IP, they must disclose that in an 8K. So let's go to the next screen, or next slide here. Okay. So why does the SEC want to do this? Because frankly, they think that shareholders would benefit from knowing, right? If I know that the company that I've invested in, suddenly its IP leaked, right? Would that impact potential revenues in the future? And should I sell? or should I buy more if they've handled the breach appropriately? So the SEC's motivation is protecting shareholders. And frankly, with all these breaches in the news, I think we'd be better off knowing more of these things rather than not.
Yeah, I agree. I think the transparency aspect is incredibly important. And I'm hoping that this is going to be the motivation for corporate boards and C-level executives to take these things seriously, because the threat landscape is expanding. It's not shrinking. It's not staying. It's no longer just banks and finance. I mean, it's everybody. If there's any
It
kind of
is.
money, any kind of infrastructure, you're going to be a target. And always remember, I mean, you could be a retail company that has very little, you're not a finance company, but someone's going to use you as a way to attack somebody else. So it's important that people take security seriously, and I think that this is a step in the right direction.
So the other side of it is, it's not just the breaches that have to get
Right.
announced. It's also, how are you managing your cybersecurity risk? What is your strategy around this and your governance practices? Even going as far as, what kind of experience does your board have with cybersecurity? So we've seen a huge demand for cybersecurity practitioners, but now that's even going to carry over to board level positions. I never would have expected this. Like, that's a really intense escalation in cybersecurity requirements for companies.
It really is, especially at a board level. Too oftentimes, public boards are made up of senior business leaders who may not have a certain awareness of what cybersecurity is, much less the details. And so I think this is one more place to be a voice of, why are we doing this? It does cost money. But why is it important? And again, it's just that transparency for people to understand and make their investment decisions accordingly.
Let's go to the next slide. We can talk about
Right.
some of the impacts here. Um, so the SEC is basically saying, you're going to have to anything that's material, and I don't know what material means. Is there a legal definition for material, Ed, that you're
Well,
aware of?
that's the problem. It's all over the place. That's why I was given the air quotes, because it is that's going to be the thing people play with. Of, it's not material because it didn't cost us any money. But what if someone used this breach of you to attack somebody else, or
Yeah,
think about supply chain attacks. So we host source code. They didn't cost us any money. The breach didn't cost us. It was just one customer, but they used that as a way to change someone's source code. And now you have malware that's embedded in someone's source code. And those are going to be that risk aspect. It's going to be tricky. There's going to need to be some definitions around that.
your supply chain story is an interesting one, because, like, we host code, I think, on GitHub or Bitbucket or one of those. And so if Microsoft gets hacked, and GitHub is, I don't know what happened with GitHub, but like data loss out of GitHub, that impacts us. Now, we're not public, but if we were, what's the rule on that? Like, our software supply chain has been impacted.
Exactly.
Is that a cybersecurity incident that we would have to report, or is it something we have to rely on Microsoft to report, even though we are materially impacted by something like that? So yeah, there's a lot of nuance to work out here.
Yeah, it's going to be lawyers are going to have a lot of activity over this. I mean, this is something that, from a law school perspective, this is a whole new field, because someone's going to have to work out what this all means, and also the downstream impact. Also, think about all the private companies that are not subject to this at all. And what you just mentioned is a perfect example of, public company has been hacked. It hasn't lost money due to the hack, but it impacts a bunch of private companies. So, how do you work that out? That's
Yeah.
I think it's going to be interesting. I think that's the mildest thing I can say about it.
Let's go to the next slide.
Yep.
All right. So what do you have to disclose? When the incident was discovered and whether it is ongoing or not.
Yeah, that one's going to be fun. So think about the average. So the study that goes, 212 days between breach and detection. I mean, so that's going to
Yeah.
be real
And it's
fun
only
for
getting
people to
longer.
start bidding. Yep.
Yeah. You got to describe the nature and the scope of the incident, right? Is it limited to one business unit? Is it limited to one jurisdiction, one country? Any data was stolen, altered, accessed, or used for any other unauthorized purpose. This is going to be difficult to figure out, right?
Yes.
Like, how do you watermark big data sets? Or do you Do you store those footprints in a blockchain? I don't know, those hashes or whatever. And there's some companies out there that are playing with this idea already. One of them is, I think, ChainKit. There's
Yeah,
one
I've heard
company
of
out
that.
there saying we'll take a hash of your data, we'll store it in the Ethereum blockchain, and you can always go back and validate it. But if it was accessed, that can be difficult to figure out. So there might be a whole industry that continues to develop just for this one bullet.
And just one thing, this is something that's going to require updates, and this is something I didn't really see defined in the policy, but typically, I believe it's 4 days. You're not going to be able to answer all these questions, so you're going to have a very bare minimum of information, and then the company's going to bring in their incident response team, probably going to bring in some sort of third party. So there's going to be a chain of updates over weeks and months because a lot of these things are so complex. You're only have a bare minimum of details.
Yeah. What kind of effect is going to the company experience to its operations because of this breach? And that's going to be another one that's difficult to measure. Like
Yes,
it could take a year to quantify what
right.
kind of impact you actually had, and then what's going on with the remediation. This is interesting. Like cybersecurity is a lot like buying insurance. Like nobody likes to pay for it, but you're happy when you have it. But is this going to shift the conversation and make cybersecurity like a competitive differentiator for some companies? Maybe,
And I
maybe.
hope it would. I mean, especially in key infrastructure. I mean, I understand capitalism is important, but key infrastructure, your gas, your pipelines, the things that power the country, you need there has to be a certain amount of stability and security there. And that's what I hope is that, hey, we're doing all the right things, and that'll be treated accordingly. I'm not sure
Yeah.
with this. I think this will be confusing, but it should be important in an ideal world.
I mean, think about like if you go to a hospital, are you going to pick a hospital that, that belongs to some, overwhelming company? And this may not make sense for non-US folks, but we pay quite a bit for our healthcare here. But are you more likely to go to a hospital that gets a better rating on its incident disclosure and on its cybersecurity strategy than one that gets a lower rating? Right? Like, there's real impact here potentially, depending on if this regulation goes through. So this is the incident side, and then let's talk about what's going to happen to the 10K if this goes through. All right. So risk management, strategy, and governance disclosure. We talked about this very briefly, but this is going to go in the 10K. So this is going to go in the annual report, right? And as far as the details of all this stuff, this is broken out in the regulation, and we'll post a link to that in the show notes. But so, these bullets here, right? Board level cybersecurity expertise. Could be some good opportunities here for cybersecurity experts at that level. What kind of governance, and then the overall risk management and strategy. So, how are you dealing with cybersecurity risks from a strategic perspective, and what kind of expertise are you able to attract? So, I think this is an interesting maturity of what public companies have to do.
It's hopeful. I like it. The thing I'm fearing is as administrations change, how the SEC enforces things change, where companies need long-term stability. If I'm a Fortune 500, I want to start this program and have consistency over time because it's going to be really tough. That you have so many costs, so many demands. Prioritizing what you're doing can be really tough. So I'm just hoping that there's going to be a consistent strategy here over time from the SEC of how to handle these things.
Yeah. And if you're thinking about starting a company as an entrepreneur, cybersecurity, it looks like a very bright future. So something to think about as you're going forward with this.
You saw what Laceworks got in funding, so you bet that or
Yeah.
blockchain. You know,
Yeah. Right. Right. So that's what we've got. Privacy Shield 2.0, TBD, and then the new SEC cybersecurity disclosure and strategy requirements that are not approved yet, but they likely will be. Right now, the SEC is accepting public comment on these regulations, and I think that's open until what, June, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then we'll see what happens. So that's all we've got for today. Ed, you got any final comments?
No, I mean, I think this is a great discussion. I think for our practitioners, people who are deep in this space, I mean, these are ongoing conversations. I'm sure we're gonna talk about this again really soon.
Yeah, yeah. As soon as these things get finalized and then knocked down in court, we'll be back to talk about them. But you can certainly mitigate a lot of these risks with Cribl Stream today. We're seeing companies do it every day. All right, Ed, thank you very much. Great as always
you.
to connect. We'll be back next week with something else.
All right. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Back pat for me. Why? I'll tell you why, Sharp. Clint Sharp. I'm not going to lie, it's a pretty good name. Good superhero name. Clint Sharp. Mild-mannered CEO Clint Sharp runs $1 million friggin' whatever by day, but by night he becomes Spaceboy. Yeah, Spaceboy. And you know why you're Spaceboy, Eastwood? Because Elon owes me one. Yeah. So I got you out there, Spaceboy. I took you to the stars, Spaceboy. You're welcome. Stank you, you're Smelcom. Elon owed me one. That guy fucks. You gotta let me know if the shuttle has doors that open like this or like this. Clinty boy, Spaceboy. Ah.